We live in interesting times for the headlines.
But the important thing,
Hong Kong's chief executive continued to campaign in support of her administration's new extradition law. The United States urged Hong Kong to listen to its residents on concerns about allowing extraditions to mainland China. A helicopter crashed on the roof of a rain-shrouded Midtown Manhattan skyscraper, killing the pilot and briefly triggering memories of 9/11, though it appeared to be an accident. And our EBC Russian Bureau was able to talk to House Speaker Gloria Arroyo when she attended the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Arroyo is pushing for the protection and legalization of OFWs in Russia. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us, and now to the news. Hong Kong's chief executive continued to campaign in support of her administration's unpopular new extradition law. Carrie Lam told reporters that Hong Kong's Secretary for Security has written to the Legislative Council to provide details of a policy statement from the government, which would detail safeguards for possible targets of the extradition law. Lam also emphasized that under the law, Hong Kong courts would have the authority to decide about extradition and not the chief executive. Take a look.
but the important thing is if the court decides not to surrender, even the chief executive could not overrule the court to say that because somebody wants this offender, I will surrender. That is not possible, because if that's possible, that means that the chief executive is above the law or totally disregarding the law, and that is something no chief executive could do in a highly civilized and rule of law society like Hong Kong. Thank you very much.
Now, Lam's comments came after hundreds.
To say, I'm listening still to different opinions, and my officials will explain further. No, there's nothing further to explain. We don't need any more verbal or even written safeguards in the law now. It's so obvious. We want this bill to be scrapped altogether, because there's no point to say that we can protect you under this label called rule of law, under when it comes to China extradition. This doesn't make sense. This just won't work, because there is no fair trial. There is no humane punishment guarantees on the mainland.
Now, Lam's comments came after hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets in the semi-autonomous Chinese territory over the weekend to protest the legislative proposal that would allow criminal suspects to be extradited to mainland China. The protest appeared to be Hong Kong's largest in more than a decade and reflected growing apprehension about relations with the Communist Party-ruled mainland. Now, Lam said the government had considered concerns from the private sector and altered the bill to improve human rights safeguards. The full Hong Kong legislature is expected to resume debate on the amendments on Wednesday, and a vote is expected this month. Meanwhile, the United States State Department expressed concerns about the government law that allows extraditions to mainland China. State Department spokeswoman Morgan Ortago said that the massive protests showed the breadth of opposition to the law. Chief Executive Carrie Lam refused or rejected calls to delay or withdraw the law. Take a look.
The peaceful demonstration by hundreds of thousands of Hong Kongers yesterday clearly shows the public's opposition to the proposed amendments. The United States shares the concern of many in Hong Kong that the lack of procedural protections in the proposed amendments could undermine Hong Kong's autonomy and negatively impact the territory's long-standing protections of human rights, fundamental freedoms, and democratic values, as enshrined in the Basic Law and the Sino-British Joint Declaration. We are also concerned that the amendments could damage Hong Kong's business environment and subject our citizens residing in or visiting Hong Kong to China's capricious judicial system.
Organizers said more than 1 million people marched against the law, bringing central Hong Kong to a standstill at the weekend. Beijing was unmoved by the protests, with Foreign Ministry spokesman Zheng Shuang saying it will continue to firmly support the Hong Kong administration.
第一，中央政府将继续坚定支持香港特区政府推进修订2个条例的工作。第二，我们坚决反对任何外部势力干预香港特区立法事务的错误言行。
Meanwhile, Hong Kong and legal and executive leaders reacted to the announcement that a highly controversial bill that would allow criminal suspects to be extradited to mainland China will proceed to the legislature for debate. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam said that the bill will proceed to the legislature after the territory's largest protests in at least a decade filled the streets to oppose the legislation. Lawyer and member of Lam's Administration Advisory Committee, Ronnie Tong Kawa, said Sunday's protest showed a lack of trust in Hong Kong's administration, partly because Lam was picked by Beijing and not elected by popular vote. Take a listen.
The government is asking those people with decades of mistrust suddenly to trust the system and to accept assurances that the mainland will offer, that they'll be honoured. And quite clearly that's not persuading the people.
We need to gain the trust and confidence of Beijing so that they can allow us the freedom of political reform.
They don't want to see Hong Kong turn into another Taiwan, or
they don't want to see Hong Kong as a base of subversion. And I'm sorry, I mean, we're doing exactly that. But the safeguard is being carried out by our judges. If there comes a day that our judges cannot strictly apply our law, then extradition is the least thing you have to worry about. You have to worry about the rapid deterioration of rule of law in Hong Kong, and with that, one country, two systems. But at this moment, I have every confidence in our judges being able to deal with this in a fair and open manner for the world to see.
Opponents of the proposed extradition amendment say the changes would significantly compromise Hong Kong's legal independence, long viewed as one of the main differences between the territory and mainland China. Hong Kong Bar Association Chair Philip Dyke said a lack of faith in Beijing remained a crucial issue, and critics believe the legislation would put Hong Kong residents at risk of being entrapped in China's opaque judicial system, in which political opponents have been charged with economic crimes or ill-defined national security offenses. Hong Kong currently limits extraditions to jurisdictions with which it has existing agreements and to others on an individual basis. China has been excluded from those agreements because of concerns over its judicial independence and human rights record. In other news, Thailand's junta leader has been officially proclaimed prime minister after the king endorsed parliament's vote to allow him to keep the position. General Prayut Chan-o-cha knelt before a portrait of King Maha Vajiralongkorn and performed 3 elaborate bows during a ceremony at his government office on Tuesday to confirm his appointment. Prayut had served as a prime minister since he led a military coup that toppled an elected government in 2014. The junta will seize power once a new cabinet is inaugurated. In a brief televised live speech after the ceremony, he pledged to, quote, dedicate myself to public service with honesty and integrity in pursuit of the greater good of the country and of the people of Thailand. Prayut's government had enacted new election laws that gave him an advantage in a general election held in March. Prayut did not contest the election but won a joint parliament vote last week to become prime minister. The structure of the voting system made it almost impossible for his challenger to beat him.
ก็ได้กล่าวน้อมสำนึกในพระมหากรุณาธิคุณและกล่าวขอบคุณในวาระที่พระบาทสมเด็จพระเจ้าอยู่
To the U.S. now, a helicopter crashed on the roof of a rain-shrouded Midtown Manhattan skyscraper, killing the pilot and briefly triggering memories of 9/11, though it appeared to be an accident. The crash near Times Square and Trump Tower shook the 750-foot AXA Equitable building, sparked a fire, and forced office workers to flee on elevators and downstairs, according to witnesses and officials. Let's listen in.
What we know is that approximately 1:32 this afternoon, the helicopter took off from the 34th Street heliport, and about 11 minutes later, crashed on the roof across the street from where we are now. Right now, our Detective Bureau, our Intelligence Bureau, the FBI are working with the FAA and the NTSB to gather additional info on the pilot. We believe we tentatively identified the aircraft, the flight path, and its owner. Don't have too much more. As we said, that's preliminary.
We had a very strange and very troubling incident this afternoon here in Manhattan. Helicopter crashed into a building here. I want to say the most important thing first. There is no indication at this time that this was an act of terror, and there is no ongoing threat to New York City based on all the information we have right now. I've checked in with the fire department, police department, and buildings department. There is no danger of any kind to New Yorkers at this point. And what I'm going to tell you and what my colleagues are going to tell you is all preliminary information. I'm going to emphasize to everyone a full investigation is going on, but we have only preliminary information at this point in time. But what we do know is that one person died in this helicopter crash. That person is presumed to be the pilot, but we are still waiting for absolute confirmation of that fact. There does not appear to have been any passenger in the helicopter, but again, we're waiting for absolute confirmation of that fact. We do not know the cause, but again, we have no indication that there was any terror nexus here. There were no other injuries that we know of at this point in time to anyone in the building or on the ground. And I want to just say, thank God for that. This could have been a much worse incident. And thank God no other people were injured in this absolutely shocking, stunning incident.
And as you heard there, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio said it isn't clear why the helicopter went down. The helicopter was flying in rain and heavy clouds. From the river, it veered into Manhattan's airspace that is supposed to be off limits for security reasons. The pilot was killed. Officials didn't immediately release his name. O'Neill said the aircraft was used for executive travel, and it wasn't clear why the pilot flew into that part of Manhattan, but authorities called it an emergency landing. A flight restriction in effect since President Trump took office bans aircraft from flying below 3,000 feet within 1 mile radius of Trump Tower, which is just a few blocks from the crash site.
Did you know that there was a fire at the top of the building when that...
Meanwhile, a witness said he felt the building shake as the helicopter crashed. Here's Devin Duncan. He works in the building where the helicopter crash occurred. Take a look.
I was just doing what I was supposed to do, and I felt the building shake. There was a big shake. I thought something was wrong with the elevator at first, and then I seen everybody coming down in all of the elevators, big packed elevators, about 20, 30 people in one elevator.
Governor Andrew Cuomo, who spoke to reporters at the scene about 20 minutes after the crash, said the impact shook the building and caused a fire that was quickly brought under control. There were no other reports of injuries. The crash close to both Rockefeller Center and Times Square sent rescue vehicles swarming to the building and immediately evoked memories of September 11 attacks. Though officials said there were no indications it was related to terrorism. The Federal Aviation Administration said it will investigate, and it wasn't immediately known what type of helicopter was involved. New York officials also said the pilot was believed to be the only one aboard. In other news, farmers in Sardinia are complaining of grasshoppers and locusts, a species of grasshopper that are swarming the Italian island and destroying farmlands. Take a look. Footage from Nuoro in the center of Sardinia showed millions of what are believed to be grasshoppers crowding the field of grass, a tree, and a building. Representatives from Italy's Coldireri Agricultural Association said the large number of insects are destroying hay that is meant to feed farmers' livestock. Farmers are now calling on authorities for assistance. Meanwhile, Kenyan scientists are researching the benefits of using insects as an alternative source of protein. As the population continues to grow, putting a strain on food resources, eating bugs could well become the norm. Eating bugs are not considered a delicacy in most parts of the world. In fact, most people would refuse to eat them. But in Kenya, some tribes have been eating insects for as far as they can remember, and now some scientists are beginning to recommend it. The African continent has some of the richest diversity of edible insects. Locusts, crickets, and black soldier larvae are some of the insects that have been recommended by scientists at the International Center for Insect Physiology, or ICIPE, as a good source of protein. Chrysanthus Tanga, an entomologist at ICIPE, explains insects could be a solution to the growing demand for protein products as the human population increases in the next 30 years.
The increasing world population, which is estimated to be 9.2 billion by 2050, there is going to be an increased demand for protein products, and the dependence on conventional protein sources like plants and livestock. It has clearly been demonstrated that this is not going to be sustainable. And so FAO came up with a regulatory framework to encourage the consumption of insects. And given that insects are cultural heritage in most countries, about 50 countries in the world, this becomes a very handy aspect to replace this conventional or substitute these conventional protein sources.
Insects consume less feed than livestock while producing the same amount of protein. Locusts, for example, are made up of 75% protein. And Tanga says insect farming is better for the environment than raising livestock.
They require less amount of land. They require less amount of water. They also have high feed conventional rates compared to conventional livestock production. Insect also produce less amount of greenhouse gases. That means they have less ecological footprint, which is advantageous to the environment. Insects, in terms of digestibility, also have high level of digestibility compared to the last protein sources.
Not only do insects have a low carbon footprint, but he also explains insects are more easily digested compared to other protein sources. In this kitchen, the chef is cooking up locusts. Fried with peppers and spices, diners at this restaurant enjoy an array of insect dishes. Diner Sevgat Subramanian says when you first try insects, it's difficult to adjust to the taste.
When you see the live insect for the first time, it was a bit difficult to take it, but then when I started eating it, I think now the crickets are much more tastier than grasshoppers. It has a nice fatty taste with sweetness and salt mixed, and when they're spiced well, they're very tasty food.
Insects are not only used for food, they can be used in fertilizers as well. Paul Kibogo is the Chief Executive Officer at Lee Organic Fertilizer that uses insects to create powerful fertilizers.
We process insects into very simple and very powerful fertilizer that contains all the minerals that soils require for us to plant. So we want to eliminate the need of using multiple fertilizers, and also we want to consider the cost benefits. So at the end of the day, from these insects, you are able to get fertilizer that is cost effective and of high quality. That is what we call nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium fertilizer, NPK.
In the Africa in general, or in the world in general, there's problem of protein in animal feeds because of the expensive price and the unavailability. This is because of overfishing, and in some countries like in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, there's a ban in overfishing, and because of that, there's that problem, protein problem. And so we are now looking at alternative sources, and we've realized that insect could be a very important source that can easily replace or substitute fish meal in animal feeds.
But how nutritious are insects for you? According to the Food and Agricultural Organization, or FAO, insects are a rich source of high-quality proteins, amino acids, and vitamins. Insects' proteins level ranges between 20 to 73%.
Insect is a very good source to replace fish meal because it has it's nutrient rich. It has high protein levels, which could range between 20 to about 73%. Insects are also have high fat levels, up to 40%. They also have a lot of micronutrients like zinc, like also some amino acids, which are serial limiting in most cases. And so when you incorporate this in animal feeds, it becomes much more profitable compared to using fish meal, which is very expensive.
Eagle News International will be right back.
Health is our most important asset, and it should always
Welcome back. Mount Agung in Indonesia's resort island of Bali erupted and spewed plumes of ash and smoke. The volcano has been erupting periodically since it rumbled back to life in 2017, sometimes grounding flights and forcing residents to flee their homes. Now, last summer, dozens of flights were canceled after Agung erupted, while tens of thousands of locals fled to evacuation centers after an eruption in 2017. The last major eruption of Agung in 1963 killed around 1,600 people. Indonesia is situated on the Pacific Ring of Fire and a vast zone of geological instability where the collision of tectonic plates causes frequent quakes and major volcanic activity. In other news, Iran's foreign minister has again threatened the United States over what he describes as an economic war launched by Washington against Tehran. Mohammad Javad Zarif said that the U.S. cannot expect to stay safe after launching its economic war. He directly blamed President Trump for the ongoing tensions between Washington and Tehran.
نمیشه توقع داشت که جنگ اقتصادی علیه مردم عادی ایران در جریان باشه و کسانی که از این جنگ حمایت میکنند و یا کسانی که این جنگ رو راه انداختند در امان باشند.
Now, Zarif's comments came during a news conference with visiting German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas, who had traveled to Tehran in an effort to ease tensions. The tensions recently soared over America deploying an aircraft carrier and B-52 bombers to the Persian Gulf over a still unexplained threat it perceives from Tehran. Last month, Tehran said it would begin enriching uranium closer to weapons grade if Europe didn't come up with new terms for the deal by July 7. The move also comes after the U.S. pulled out of the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also known as Iran Nuclear Deal or JCPOA, over a year ago. Maas said that Germany, alongside France, the United Kingdom, and the European Union, was trying everything in its power to prevent failure of the deal by working on a financial special purpose vehicle that would allow to keep up commercial ties with Iran after the U.S. pulled out of the JCPOA. Meanwhile, U.S. State Department spokeswoman Morgan Ortagus dismissed Iran's foreign minister's comments as typical behavior from the Iranian government as it confronts a Trump administration campaign of increasing economic and diplomatic pressure.
Making threats, using nuclear blackmail, and terrorizing other nations is typical behavior for the revolutionary regime in Tehran. Tomorrow, they will probably threaten once again to close the Strait of Hormuz. We aren't impressed. Iran faces a simple choice. It can either behave like a normal nation or watch its economy crumble.
The crisis takes root in U.S. President Trump's decision over a year ago to withdraw America from Iran's 2015 nuclear deal with world powers. Trump also reinstated tough sanctions on Iran targeting its oil sector. Meanwhile, the head of the UN Atomic Watchdog Agency expressed his concern over increasing tensions surrounding the Iranian nuclear issue. Yukiya Amano, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, told the regular Board of Governors meeting that the agreement was still a significant gain for nuclear verification.
I'm worried about increasing tensions over the Iranian nuclear issues. As I have constantly emphasized, the nuclear-related commitments entered into by Iran under the JCPOA represent a significant gain for nuclear verification. I therefore hope that ways can be found to reduce current tensions through dialogue. It is essential that Iran fully implements its nuclear-related commitments under the JCPOA.
has Iran made good
In its May
on
report
any
to
of
member
its
states, the
announcements in
IAEA
terms of,
said Iran has
increasing
stayed within key limitations for uranium and heavy water stockpile, but said stockpiles were increasing. The nuclear deal has been complicated by the unilateral withdrawal of the U.S. last year and Washington's increased sanctions, which have taken a toll on the Iranian economy.
We remain ready to play an essential role.
In other news, when Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump shook hands before the world's cameras in Singapore a year ago on Wednesday, they pledged change and progress, but now they are gripped by diplomatic recriminations after a failed second meeting in Hanoi. Take a look. In Singapore, the first ever summit between a sitting U.S. president and a North Korean leader, Kim signed a vaguely worded deal on denuclearization, touted by Trump as a historic breakthrough. But a second meeting in Vietnam in February ended abruptly without even a scheduled lunch, after the two failed to agree on what the North would be willing to give up in exchange for sanctions relief. The process remains deadlocked, and analysts say the two sides have sobered up since.
Well, immediately after Singapore summit, we had a tidal wave of completely unrealistic, almost comical expectations. Because it was officially advertised that North Koreans were going to surrender nuclear weapons. Everybody with any knowledge of the situation fully understood that it was not going to happen.
Now, Kim declared an end to nuclear tests and long-range missile launches last year, amid a rapid rapprochement paving the way for the Singapore meeting. Since Hanoi, Pyongyang has accused Washington of acting in bad faith and given it until the end of the year to change its approach. And last month, the North fired short-range missiles for the first time since November 2017. Officials in Washington say they have proposed working-level talks to Pyongyang, but are not planning another summit until a deal is hammered out. And with the U.S. president who says he is in no rush and appears content with the status quo, analysts say the ball is now in North Korea's court, even as Pyongyang insists otherwise. President Trump has dismissed worries about the North's recent missile tests, reiterating his trust in Kim, who he described as a man who perhaps wants to get attention.
If no deal is reached, if we are not going to have any kind of noticeable breakthrough by the, say, early next year, well, we will probably see a full-scale, if you like, provocations, tensions building by the North Koreans.
We're signing a very important document, pretty comprehensive document.
And the news continues here on Eagle News International. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Health is our most important.
lawlaw sa gitna ng dilim. Ako ang mata sa sahing papawid. Ako ang dilat sa tuwing ang bayan ko ay tulog ng mahimbing. Ang aming buhay handang ialay para sa bayan. Kayo'y handang paglingkuran.
Join us in celebrating the 72nd anniversary of the Philippine Air Force.
Our ABC Russian Bureau was able to talk to House Speaker Gloria Arroyo when she attended the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Arroyo is there to push for the protection and legalization of OFWs in Russia. Our ABC correspondent Marisol Bumanlag reports from Moscow.
Speaker Gloria Macapagal Arroyo arrived Russia to discuss labor agreement of Filipino workers in Russia together with Russian officials. Gloria Macapagal Arroyo calls to legalize workers to lessen the percentage of severe illegal recruitment and human trafficking cases. Gloria Macapagal Arroyo visited Russia for the purpose of legalization of overseas Filipino workers in Russia and to discuss about the bilateral agreement between Philippines and the said country. Aiming to add in her voice and to emphasize the legalization of Filipino workers, Arroyo also aims to aid the problems of Filipinos that fall as a victim of illegal recruiters and human traffickers.
I decided to go to St. Petersburg again this time because one of the topics was about immigration policy. And I have been aware that our Filipinos here have a problem with the immigration authorities. So I decided to take the opportunity to add my voice to the many advocates who are saying that we should have a bilateral labor agreement with Russia.
How is it?
Well, when we had our discussion, there were those who were very open to it already, like the head of the visa department. There were those who were still a little bit hesitant, like the deputy minister of development, and there were those who preferred to concentrate on liberalization on the professionals and licensed workers, like the big corporations.
Addition to that, Arroyo also mentioned that some of the Russian officials she talked with agreed to legalize Filipino workers in Russia and others are still hesitant.
But there were also those, aside from the head of the visa, which is very important, there are also those like the government of Leningrad region who say that the work of Filipinos taking care of houses and children is just as important as the work of the skilled professionals, licensed professionals. So that was very heartwarming, and the university professor agreed with him as well. So this is I hope that it will contribute to our advocacy, especially because the head of the visa section is said that he's open to negotiating the bilateral labor agreement.
How do you feel for yung pagsalubong ko sa inyo ng ating mga
Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy that in many of their comments are very appreciative of the work I've done for them, and I'm so happy that they were able to ask questions that are very relevant to their life here and the lives of their families back home, and I hope that we gave them answers that were at least a little bit satisfactory.
The said visit is considered a successful one according to Ambassador Carlos Soreta, and the head of visa department here in Russia is open for legalization of domestic helpers, skilled workers, and professional Filipinos to work in this country legally without any predicament.
Daan-daan Filipino nag-hello sa kanya at nag-picture. Dito naman sa embassy, we had about 100 people attend, mga maganda yung mga tanong, maganda yung sagot niya. She's very happy na ma-meet ang Filipino community dito sa mosque. Ito yung pinakaunang Filipino community na pinuntahan niya. Pakita niya na ang mga Filipino workers natin na-contribute sa lipunan ng kung nasaan sila. Nakakatulong sila sa mga pamilya na gusto magtrabaho, lalo na yung parehong asawa, makakatrabaho, makakakontribute sa Russian economy. So nag-agree naman yung ibang panelists, mga matataas na opisyal at saka mga taga-private sector. I think in terms of bringing more emphasis on the issue, sa mga Russian officials at private sector, nagsaksido siya na i-convey sa kanila na napakaseryoso ang Pilipinas na magkaroon ng malegalize ang mga Pilipinos dito at malegalize ang proseso ng pag-recruitment ng Filipino workers na papunta Russia.
Reporting from Moscow, Russia, this is Marisol Bumanlag, and I am 1 with 25.
In other business news, the chief strategist of China's telecommunications giant Huawei said it will take longer than anticipated to reach its target of becoming the world's largest smartphone maker. Take a look.
那到这个今年1季度的时候呢，我们已经成为了全球的销售第2。如果没有遇到什么意外的话呢，我们本来觉得我们到4季度就会变成全球第1了。那看来这个进程可能要拉长了。牌子，咱们华为的牌子，我是负责品牌的，这样的话我压力巨大。用户呢，可能对我们手机。
Xiao's comments comes after Washington banned U.S. firms from exporting components to Huawei last month. Huawei is the world's #1 network equipment provider and second largest smartphone maker, and U.S. officials claim Huawei is legally beholden to China's ruling communists, which could use the company's products for cyber espionage, though the U.S. has presented no evidence of intentional spying. Xiao defended the company's development of next-generation 5G technology.
我们还有4个屏幕，就是我们认为这个阶段真的是到了一个历史性的节点，它是一个大的升级换代的时刻。我们现在看到的是5G 的换代，但对于我们消费者业务来说，我们看到这个换代是更加大的一个换代。每一次换代都是勇敢者的游戏，在这场残酷的竞争中，胜利者会成为下一个时代的强者，登上全新的历史舞台，而失败者会不进则退，在新旧更迭中掉队。所以，我想我们现在要做的一切事情，就是为了能够去在下一代的竞争中，能够找到我们的方向。
Meanwhile, President Trump said he expected to meet with China's President Xi Jinping at the Group of 20 Summit or G20 Summit in Japan later this month. He stressed the importance of a meeting between him and China's Xi Jinping. Trump said more tariffs would be likely if those talks don't happen. Take a look.
I think President Xi of China, great relationship with him. I think he'll be there. We are scheduled to talk and to meet. I think interesting things will happen. Let's see what happens. Right now, we're getting 25% on $250 billion worth of goods. So a lot of money is pouring into our treasury. We've never gotten 10 cents from China. Now we're getting a lot of money from China.
China on Tuesday did not confirm a planned face-to-face meeting between President Xi Jinping and his American counterpart, President Trump, after the U.S. leader threatened new tariffs against Beijing amid an escalating trade war. Trump said a meeting with Xi has been scheduled during the G20 summit in Japan later this month, and that he expects the Chinese leader to attend. Beijing has said that while it is willing to negotiate, it will not be bullied into compromising on its core principles. In other business news, Jiz Biz, a restaurant specializing in Russian and Uzbek cuisine, has just opened in Qatar. And to find out more about this cuisine and their business, here's Dwayne Dizon from our Qatar Bureau.
What is now known as Uzbekistan has been at the crossroads of empires in the centuries past. From its Persian, Turkic, and Russian past, the country continues to thrive. Here today, we are visiting the only Uzbek-Russian restaurant in Qatar.
During our recent visit to Jizbiz, an upscale Uzbek cuisine located in the Pearl, Qatar, we were treated to not just a culinary treat, but also to the amazing stories of the shop owner, their crew, and the story behind the interiors of the restaurant. The dishes we were served includes the traditional dish lagman, a noodle-based beef dish which is fried and mixed with vegetables, and manti, which is similar to the common dumplings in Uzbek style, and served with a traditional yogurt sauce, as well as samsa, which is a derivative of the Arabic or Indian food called samosa, a type of fried or baked dish with vegetable and meat fillings, and was served with a tomato-based sauce. The owner of the Jizbiz restaurant, Mrs. Dilshoda Norkuzieva, explains the origin of the restaurant's name.
Why did you name your restaurant Jizbiz?
This is there are restaurants in Uzbekistan called Jizbiz, and we because of it's a kind of dish called jiz in our menu, or it's because of there are a sound of the food, like there are sound just
From the cooking?
Yeah, when you're cooking. I think it's because of that, yes. And also this is very shortcut to remember for the customers.
Mrs. Dilshoda also explained that the decorations of the fine dining Uzbek restaurant mostly were shipped straight from their country. They include the rugs, embroidery decorations, figurines, and other embellishments. The restaurant's crew all hail from different parts of Uzbekistan, including their chefs, while most of their customers are Russian and former Soviet republics expatriates. In the distant past, the country has been at the crossroads of the Silk Roads, an ancient trade network that stretches from China all the way to the Mediterranean.
What is your best seller? For example, I'm a customer. When I visit here today, what's their favorite dish? Customers.
We have every day, every new customers from Russia, from Kazakhstan, from Uzbekistan more, and from Qatar also have one every day, every customers.
So, for example, a Russian customer, what's their favorite here in Jizbiz?
Favorite also meat. So meat, for example, our lagman also they like it. It's handmade long spaghetti, some vegetables and meat. It's so nice taste.
How about Arabic customers? What's their favorite?
Our Arabic customers like just meat. We have khazanko, it's lamb brisket with potato. It's roasted meat, and also our jiz. This is also lamb meat, but it's better than kazan kebab.
Why did you set up your business here in Qatar?
Because I'm from Uzbekistan, and when I came to Qatar, and there was no any restaurant in Qatar, which I want to go and enjoy our cuisine, our food. Maybe the reason because of that I opened this restaurant.
Uzbek food is very eclectic, having their influence come from Turkish, Iranian, Russian, and even Chinese dishes. Uzbekistan is a landlocked country in Central Asia and is the most populous country in that region. Its history stretches since the times of Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, the Turks, and the Mongols.
Today, the country is heavily influenced by Russian culture, including the names of their people, and Russian being the second most widely spoken language. From Eagle News Qatar Bureau, this is Dwayne Dizon. We are One with 25.
Thank you, Dwayne. Eagle News International will be right back.
Philippines, Manila or Quezon City is a popular destination. But oftentimes the hustle and bustle of the city can be more stressful on your vacation. So when you feel the need to reconnect to nature or relax again, there's a beautiful oasis just outside of the city called the Garden at Ciudad de Victoria. That you can see here include hydrangea, snapdragon, and stargazers. They're truly beautiful. The gardens at Ciudad de Victoria are so peaceful, tranquil, and beautiful that it's become a haven for young couples and a very popular venue for engagement photos. The next time you want an escape from the big city, the garden at Ciudad de Victoria is a wonderful place to visit.
All right, so that's all the time we have for you tonight. I'm Alma Angeles, always one with 25. Good night.